On this episode, retired combat pilot, lawyer, and host of the Greg Krino Show, Greg Krino joins us to talk the 2024 elections. Yeah, I know it seems a bit early, but trust us, you're going to want to hear this. Today, on the Open Highway.
This episode is brought to you by Our Weird World. Every week, I, John Henson, dive into weird, crazy, and forgotten stories from the history books that you have probably never heard before. I try to put some humor into it, or maybe I just come off sounding like a dick. That's really up for you to decide. But join me every Monday. Subscribe everywhere that you get your podcasts.
Hey everybody, Eric here. I just wanted to take a moment and thank you for your continuing support for the Open Highway. And I have news for you. The Open Highway is now on Substack. That's right, head on over to Substack where we take a deeper dive into the news of the day, the topics that you hear on the show, or pretty much whatever I'm interested in. The link is in the show notes, so head on over and sign up, and now you can be part of the conversation. But most of all, thanks for listening.
The Open Highway with Eric Erickson.
I'll get there. But I'm glad to see that you're doing so great. I mean, I'm gonna have to get some advice from you here when I can breathe.
I can't complain. Things are going well. The tech's coming together. The message is coming together. The guests are great. You know, it's like I always say, man. If I could sit at home and do this 6 days a week, 7 days a week, I'd be the happiest person on the planet. But I always told you too, the reason I started doing it was because I wanted to learn about myself and I wanted to ask these questions and kind of get out there. And that's the growth that I'm seeing in myself has been amazing, you know, and being able to learn these things and meet these people, you know, it's been,
it's like an intellectual adventure. You know, I think it's similar to people who want to go out there and explore the physical world. I think there's an intellectual and maybe even emotional world that we also want to get into, and podcasting definitely helps to do that. You learn a lot about yourself. I mean, I find myself even changing a little bit, maybe not my policy opinions per se, but the way I view the world and the way I understand and approach people's, you know, opinions and how I engage is changed. So,
I still maintain there's this great middle. I still maintain that there's this great and growing middle where people aren't happy with the extremes on either side. And there's like they always say, the big tent. I think there's a big tent in the middle where we can all kind of get together and say, you know what, I don't agree with everything, but I understand why you think that way. Doesn't mean I have to think that way, but I can appreciate that you've gone through a thought process.
Yeah, and I think at least being sincere as well. I acknowledge that there are some opinions I have that are extreme, but you know, and I go through the process. I acknowledge people can have a difference of opinion. I think that's the thing that you just said, is that as long as you've gone through the process and you can see that there are holes and limitations in throughout that process, and go, hey, look, this is my opinion, but I can see where I could be wrong. And I think also if you are wrong, admitting it, I think sincerity is a big part of it, a very big part of it. I don't like when people say, hey, this is how it is. And you could tell in the back of their mind, even they don't quite believe it.
Yeah, they're just repeating it.
I'm like,
that's what my dad taught me, and that's what I'm doing. And Grandpa did that.
Yeah, sure. Like I said, I'm sure I have some policy opinions. I'm like, I know that people would find extreme, but at the same time, I don't begrudge somebody for saying they're extreme, because they are. But I'm also hesitant as well. I think as you explore more and as you learn more, you become a little less confident. I guess that's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, or one of those biases that we have, where the more you explore, the more hesitant you become.
The more I learn, the more I know how much I don't know. It's kind of that idea.
And I'm kind of getting to that point where I'm like, man, I have this opinion, but I'm like, I don't quite know as much anymore. And now I see these people that are like, oh, this is how it is. And I'm like, man, I'm having less respect for you now because I know you haven't done all the research. But anyway, I'm going around and around.
No. That's what we do, right?
Yeah.
That's the fun. Well, the reason I wanted to get you back on here for a bunch of reasons, but the one bigger thing that I really wanted to talk to you about today is, have you been watching my God, what is it? January 2020. And we're already talking about presidential elections, and we've got 2.5 years to go. And we're already talking about matchups. And so I thought about it. I'm like, I want to talk about this. So I go, who am I going to get a hold of? Oh, Greg.
This dude right down the street. Yeah.
Which is funny. Yeah. We live like 5 miles away from each other. We could totally, one of these days we should just rent a studio and like, just what is it, like $25 sitting there and yell at each other for an hour.
Sure.
But the thing I wanted, have you been paying attention to some of the rumors that are starting to come out? Especially, it's on both sides, but I wanted to start on the Democrats. Have you been listening to some of this about who's going to be the actual candidate coming up?
No, I mean, I have ideas just based on the last election, but if they're not one of the people that ran last time, I'm not that up on what's going on now.
Okay, well, this could be fun then, because you're like a blank slate.
Okay.
So I can come in and be like, okay, here's what I've heard.
Here's how it is.
This is what's going down. So one of the first things that, I mean, you had to have heard about this, is there's a lot of people talking about Biden. Will he run or will he not run in the next election? So my personal feeling, I don't think he's going to run. I do not think he's going to get to that. I think personally, I think they're going to come up with some reason why he decided to step aside. I don't know if it'll be the truth. I don't know if it'll be fabricated. You know, politics is honest, right? Don't know what's going to happen, but that's my call. What do you think about that? Where are you on that whole thing?
I don't think he will run either, but I think I'm going to be more charitable than you are. I think he'll just be honest and just say, hey, I ran as a transitional candidate. I think I've done my job and that I helped get us back to normal. And now it's time for me to step aside. I think he'll put a nice gloss on it, but in reality, I think he'll just say, I think in reality, it's just his health. I think, the guy is getting old. He's not the quickest up on the, he doesn't have the quickest mind. And I think there's a lot of Democrats who also want to run. I think the dirty secret in politics is that you kind of enjoy it when your side loses, because then that gives you an opportunity to run next time. And I think people are more motivated by greed than they are by necessarily helping the country, although they do want to help the country. So I think there's a lot of Democrats who want to run. I think they see I think Joe Biden is just, I don't think in his heart he really wants to do another term either. And I think they're looking at Kamala Harris saying she was unpopular with the Democrats also. So I think there's a lot of other Democrats who are seeing an opportunity. So,
well, yeah, with that segue to Harris. So yeah, we've been hearing a lot of things about Harris is being set up to step in. Well, hold on a second. Let's go to Biden. What do you think Biden's motivation was for running? Like, do you think it was an altruistic, I really want to help this country, or do you think it was part of it's my turn? I've been fighting for this for so long. I did what I had to do. Where do you feel he lands in that?
70% that it was his turn. I would say it's 70%. And I never say 100 just because that's how I am. I qualify everything. That's just like I said, the hesitation and maybe a lawyer in me that wants to make sure I'm 100% right, which I never am. So I'd say 70% that he thought that it was his turn. He ran a couple of times before. He's been there forever, and he knows that if it's now or never. I think that's why he ran. And sure, to help the country. I think people do want to help, but when push really comes to shove, I think you want to be the president. And I think it's hard to separate the two as well. But I'd say it's mostly because he felt that it was his turn, and now he's done it from his perspective and from the perspective of many Democrats. He took out Trump, who was very, very hated among the left and even the middle. So I think he felt like he did his job, and it's time to hang it up. I don't know if he has the energy to do it again. And I think there's a lot of people who just want to run as well.
Yeah. Do you think Harris was brought in? Do you think Harris was brought in specifically for, she'll be up to run in 4 years?
I think she was brought. You mean, why did Biden bring her in?
Why did Biden choose a
Harris?
running mate who didn't even win a single primary? You've got someone who was brought in. I'll say it. Someone who was brought in because they filled. I've said this before. I think the reason Harris was brought in was because they looked at this and they said, look, we have a good chance of beating Trump. We're going to win on the anybody but Trump ticket, basically.
Exactly.
And it's an opportunity to bring someone into the White House that checks some boxes. And that sounds really crass. It sounds really down and non-progressive, but
I think you're right.
They're like, this is our chance to get somebody in. It's the same way as if, God, go back to McCain when he picks Palin. Why did you make this choice? Well, it was because she checked certain boxes, and we're going to win this, and we'll be able to bring her in with us. And now that elevates us as a party. That elevates us as a candidate. Yeah. I think that was a lot of the reason, because I don't feel that she was qualified in any way, shape, or form.
She brought with her a state that was already deeply blue. So there's no political reason to bring her in from a party perspective. Mm-hmm. Yes, she was a U.S. senator, which I think is a good position to have. So in that sense, she was qualified. But yeah, she wasn't well liked even among Democrats. I think that they wanted a woman of color to be in the executive branch. It's an understandable feeling. I think there's a lot of people who are rearing for that as well. I mean, that's a huge reason. I think people voted for Barack Obama. At least that was a pretty big reason for me when I voted for him in 2008 was, I was kind of on the fence with both people. And I was like, well, it'd be nice to see somebody of, a black man as a president. It'd be really incredible. And so I think there was a little bit of that with Kamala. And now that we've kind of had that, although we haven't had a woman president, we've kind of done the box checking thing a bit now. I think people are getting exhausted by it. Fewer and fewer people care about the boxes anymore. And so I don't think it'll be as much of a factor in the next election.
I heard an interesting comparison. I was listening to Breaking Points with Crystal Ball was talking about
That's
it.
A good
I don't
show.
know if you heard this one. She made a really interesting comment about Harris, basically comparing her between the lines to Trump. And at first I was like, huh? But then I started listening to the argument, and basically what she said is you have a vice president and a candidate back when she was a candidate. Can you name right here, if I call you on the carpet, can you name one of the things that she believed in and she said she was going to change, and one concrete plank in her platform?
Concrete plank in Kamala Harris's platform.
Yes, there are Democrats. They all believe in certain things, but can you name one thing? You're like, I'm going to vote for her because she believed in this.
No,
you can't. The same with Buttigieg, but we'll get back to him. But the point was that it was a cult of personality, that it was Harris going, vote for me because I'm the only one who can fix this. Sound familiar? Vote for me because I'm the one who can take care of this. Don't ask me how. Don't ask me what. Just I'm the one. And I was like,
now I will counter with that a little bit, because I'm just trying to think of the counter arguments. Is like, do I know anybody's specific big policy that they wanted to change other than maybe Bernie Sanders? Like, that's a guy that I can go, okay, I know what he wants to do. But other than him, I don't know what the other, I'll say, normal Democrats wanted to do from a policy perspective either. So I don't know if I would single her out. I would have to think about that though.
Yeah. But at least Biden, when he was coming out, you're like, okay, we know Biden believes in healthcare. We know Biden believes, he came out and he's like, here, based on my Senate history, I believe there should be Medicare for all, or Medicaid, depending on who you talk to. There should be term limits. There should be this, there should be that, there should be that. And at least he came out, and Harris kind of came out and said, well, I experienced this and I experienced that. Biden, you don't know what it means to be in the bus to the school and this, da, 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 da. And it's like, okay, that's great.
I was that little girl.
I was,
I remember that. That is one thing I remember is the busing, and she said that I was that little girl. I can't think of anything policy wise. I felt like she'd put her finger in the wind and just do whatever it took. She seems socially awkward. Her laugh is not good. Just from a personal perspective, she's not.
Have you heard the interviews she's
compelling.
done like the last 2 weeks? Like, have you heard these interviews where she snaps back?
I don't watch the full interviews. I'll see little clips. I heard her say something pretty incoherent about now is the time to be doing what we should be doing, and the time is now. And she seems like somebody who's trying to like be like a very charismatic, like an MLK, but she can't do it. Like she there's too much spinning going on in her mind.
She wants to be Barack Obama.
Like from Barack Obama, he's just very talented, and she is not. And I think that if you're not that talented in the personality oratory part, don't try. It's like being a comedian. Like you can't, if you're not naturally gifted at being funny, like don't try. Just if something happens to come to your mind and it's funny, and go ahead and say it. But as soon as you try to be funny, you're going to just destroy yourself. And I think that she's trying to be this uplifting, charismatic figure, and she can't. And I think maybe in her heart, she probably is more of a moderate person. She's probably just a person who wants to do well and work her way up, and probably has pretty moderate feelings about the world. But she's in the Democratic Party, and she's in California, and you are going to have to be pretty left if you're going to succeed there. And I don't know if in her heart she is that way. And so she's just having to fake it, and it's just kind of crumbling. So I don't know whether that's good or bad. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe, again, I don't know if she's actually is moderate. I just have the feeling that what she says and what she actually is are two different things.
Oh, I'd agree with that. I think I definitely, which leads me to Buttigieg, because I believe he's the same kind of candidate. There's that, I really want to see that documentary that they did about him, because I've heard a lot of things in there that are very telling about he is. And again, it's the same thing I said to you. It's like, if you talk to somebody, oh, I love Mayor Pete. Why? Oh, because he's a great guy. Why would you vote for him then? Oh, because he's a great guy. I believe what he believes in. What does he believe in? Oh, well, everybody should be recognized. Okay, that's not a political stance. That's not a plank in your platform. And again, now we're seeing with him as Secretary of Transportation, it's like, well, what is he doing? We don't even know what he does as Secretary of Transportation. He pops up every once in a while. It's like, this is bad. We're going to fix it. And then he disappears on maternity leave for 3 months. I don't see how somebody can sit there and say he's a viable candidate. Yeah.
I find him interesting as well. And here's why, is that I have a good friend who is a Republican fundraiser, I'll put him on the moderate right, just to make it simple. He's a very nice, intelligent, he's not like a crazy Trump supporter or anything like that, but I'll put him on a moderate yet solid Republican stance. He said of all the Democrats that he would support if he had to, it would be Pete Buttigieg. And I didn't dig too deeply into why, but from what I'm gathering from his Facebook posts and from talking to him about a year ago, was the last time I actually talked to him, is that Pete Buttigieg, at least he's another good orator who says the right things and can kind of tap into the feelings that we have. And I think that's what people really are voting on is temperament, and they want to be heard. And I think when Pete talks, he at least pays lip service. You might think it's lip service only, but he at least kind of acknowledges the middle and the right when he talks, and he's not like this firebrand jerk. So I think when people say when they're supporting somebody, they're more talking about personality. I think you're hitting on a good point here, in that most people just don't pay attention to policy that much. Maybe that's the answer. We kind of vote based on temperament and maybe a little bit of background, like, okay, he was a Rhodes Scholar. Yeah, he was a mayor. I know. I mean, when's the last time we actually voted for a mayor? I don't know, but for president. But I think that's what they look at. They look at education, they look at temperament, they look at personality, and they look at speaking skills. Who wants to go and dig through everybody's voting record and dig through all these think tank studies to see which policies are good. I think that's just sort of the sad fact of politics.
So it's become a cult of personality,
Yes.
not a policy issue. When's the last time that we had a president who was really able to run on policy and able to run on, even whether or not they were BSing about it and they didn't really believe it or whatever, but at least got out there and we went, okay, we know what they stand for on the right or on the left.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when Dukakis ran. Remember the tank?
Yes.
He riding the tank and he lost the elections. He doesn't look like somebody would ride in a tank, so I can't vote for him. It's like, but neither does Bill Clinton. Neither does George W. None of them look like they should be in a tank. Well, I don't like the way. And I knew somebody wouldn't vote for John Kerry because she didn't like the way his wife's eyes looked. There's something about her eyes. I'm like, she's not even running. It's like, nope, it's in the eyes. You can see it. I won't vote for him. I'm like, this is what we've gotten to.
Yeah,
what about the dual candidacy? Have you heard anything about that? About people who are like, we need to put Harris together with Buttigieg on the same ticket?
A dual candidacy? Is that your question?
Yeah, like there are some people who are now talking, it's like it should be Harris for president, Buttigieg for vice president in 2024. That's the Democrats' ticket.
So are you asking, like, as they run, they would say, hey, I am running for president. So Kamala would say, hey, I'm running for president and I've already selected who my VP is going to be. It's going to be Pete, and they would run together. Is that kind of what
Which is an issue right there, because that's not how we do politics. So you've got people already who are trying to put these together. There's another one saying Biden and Cheney, that he should cross the line. He should bring in Cheney as the VP. Not Dick, Liz.
Oh, okay. I was like, Dick. I'm like, oh my God. I might vote for that just to see the circus.
Do you think the U.S. could do that? Do you think American people would go for a blended ticket like that? Because there's been rumors of it in the past. John McCain wanted to bring in Droopy Dog. I can't remember his name right now. Joe Lieberman.
Oh, Lieberman. I don't think it would work at the outset. So if you did that initially, where you just told people automatically, this is the person that's going to be my VP, and you announced it 2 years ahead of time, I think that person would lose if they crossed the line, because they wouldn't win the primary, first of all. Now, after the primary, so say you win, excuse me, so say you win your Republican or Democratic primary, and then you select somebody who is on the other side. That would be interesting. I don't know. I think if you selected a very milquetoast moderate person, which I guess you would have to, because why would you select somebody who's way off on the other side?
Yeah.
It could work. It'd be interesting. I don't know the answer to that. But I think if you did it at the outset and selected somebody on the other side, I think you would get your butt kicked in your own primary. I think politics there's just an element of realism that it's hard to get over. And I don't think that people are going to change their ideology that quickly. I think it's too embedded.
And you have the establishment too. I mean, you have the RNC, you have the DCCC, you've got these foundations that you would have to get the idea passed as well. It's not that simple. It's not a movie.
It's not simple. I would like to see, I think after a primary, that would be interesting to see, maybe digging back into a person from a while ago, like take a Condoleezza Rice, for example, who is a Republican. She's well respected among the Republican Party, but she's not a cult of personality. She's got the Iraq war problem hanging over her head, but it's been quite a while ago since that was an issue. Mm-hmm. Now, if a Democrat ran and then selected her as a VP, that could work. So I think partisanship can be overcome if it's been a long time, and that person that you're picking is already kind of in the middle to begin with. I don't want to say it's impossible, but
so let me throw out one more. There's one more name that's been kind of floated around. I don't know how seriously it's been floated around, but it is floating around there. And I almost laughed just asking. Michelle Obama has actually been floated in certain circles as a potential candidate. I don't think in a million years it's going to happen, But why is it that we go to the first lady, somebody, and suddenly say, oh, well, you were the first lady, you had responsibilities in the White House, you have your own career, you are successful, but why do we suddenly go, you would make a good president? Why? We kind of did the same thing with Hillary, but that was a different story because she had goals. I think she wanted in the White House from the moment she and Bill first met. She had aspirations. But why do we suddenly go, well, let's get somebody who has no political experience and just been on the outside looking in, and they would make a good president?
I think people just want to win so badly that they let the personality dictate their vote more. I think most people probably are like you and me, where they go, hey, look, you got to have something. You got to have some gravitas behind you. You can't just be a personality. But that said, it only takes a couple of percentage points to win an election, and so our elections are only decided by a couple of percentage points in many states, and so that could be enough to push it over. Why people go, oh, that person's good enough on policy, they're good enough on values, but they really have it on personality. So let's pick them. And so I think it's just about people picking horses. Michelle Obama, I think she could succeed. Not in 2024. I don't think that's going to work in the executive. I think that she could do well doing what Hillary did, and that's run for either representative or U.S. Senate. I think that could be something.
If she wanted to, she's not going to get drafted to do it.
Yeah, she would have to want to. I don't know that she really wants to in this climate. I don't know that many people really want to in this climate. I think there's a lot of people who are just sick from during the Trump years, and even now during Biden, it's maybe not quite as bad, but we have COVID we're still dealing with, and now we have inflation and an economy that seems to be a little shaky. So I think the people who are going to run are going to be the people who really want it, and the people who are not so sure, I think, are going to decide not to do it. And I think somebody like Michelle Obama, who she doesn't need the money, she doesn't need the respect. I think that she has a lot of respect among people who are in the middle and on the left. She doesn't need any sort of status. She doesn't need the presidency, the vice presidency to be fulfilled. Well, presidency, maybe. I think maybe that would make her feel better about what she's done in the world. But short of that, I don't see her making the leap.
See it happen.
Yeah,
What about there's one name I forgot. What about Stacey Abrams? She seems to be such a polarizing figure, even in the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
She's able to get these votes, but she does put some people off. The Republicans hate her, I think, putting it lightly. But again, that's another name that gets floated, for a VP slot, and even for presidential.
But now, what office has she held before?
She's a state senator, and she ran for governor, or she's running for governor this year.
Man, I think people need to stop like swinging for the fences. That's the problem. Is people are trying to get these big long shot candidates that they like, and that came so close, and they want to like elevate them. Like, if it didn't work in Georgia, then why do you think it's going to work in the whole United States? I don't know. Like, Beto O'Rourke is doing that as well. And I think these people, they have big ideas and they speak well, but you gotta hold some office first and get some actual real world experience. I think people are becoming smarter. I know it sounds crazy to say that, but I think the average voter is becoming smarter. I think the middle is getting bigger. I think the partisanship seems crazier when you watch TV and online and stuff like that. But I think there is this big, growing and silent middle that is just thirsty for actual smart, honest people who have a good resume and could make it. And I think, to go way back to what you said earlier in the conversation, I think the box checking is becoming tiresome. And I think it's being exposed for the insincerity that it is. And we're running out of boxes. I mean, the only other quote unquote box to check is having a female as the president. Yeah. And, if we have one that I think is, fairly moderate on policy and can speak well and is not polarizing, I think she'll make it. She'll do great.
So there's the question. Is the reason that we haven't, at least in the last couple of electoral cycles, is the reason that we haven't had a solid female even candidate, let alone president, is it because the proper candidate has not arisen? Somebody that has the qualifications, man, woman, Martian, doesn't matter, that they don't have the qualifications that we want as president, they're not qualified, we don't want them? Or is it, as Americans, more of us want a male candidate to be elected than a female candidate, which is the accusation that it's sexism? Which is it?
I'd say it just comes down to, no, I think it comes down to more, I would agree that it was sexism 20 years ago or more. Now, I think it's just sheer numbers. I think there's just a lot more men that have the drive and aggression and to put up with the pain of running for office and doing those things. Like men, I think on the average, again, these are just averages, are just more aggressive and willing to take up that task. And so if you have 100 people running for a certain office and 85 of them are male, then, it kind of makes sense that there's just not going to be quite as many options on them, for us to select a good woman. Not to say there hasn't been great ones, there have been great ones, but I think it just comes down to ratio. And I think it comes down to the amount of people who are willing to throw their hat in the ring.
Yeah. And it also has to do with, you have to have ambition to the nth degree to want to be president. Ambition doesn't even cover it. You have to have ego. You have to believe in yourself that you can move mountains. And that's
the people who have those beliefs tend to be.
They do.
On the average, yeah.
Yeah, and plus we're dealing with a generational shift as well, because if you're in your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, and you're running for president now, go back to when you were a child. Can you find women in that age group? And it is increasing slowly, but in the upper end of that age group that were told as a child, you can be president, and they started planning for it. Because you basically have to be planning for this since you were at high school. There are certain things you have to achieve. There's a certain path you have to take in order for the majority of people, unless you're Donald Trump, to become a valid candidate for higher office. And like you said, they're just not there yet. There aren't enough people to draw on that.
Right. So I think you're going to see more as time goes. You'll definitely see more women jump in and throwing their hat in the ring. Hell, even now, I think I haven't looked this up recently, but I think the majority of people in college now are women. I think it's like 55% or 53%, but there's a slight majority of people getting degrees that are women. And I don't think more than 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. Mm-hmm. So things are going in that direction. We'll see it more, I think, in the future. Very few people, like even the Republican Party, nobody cares about sex. I kind of got my chops in politics in Arizona when I ran a few years ago. Arizona at the time was a very red state. Now it's more purple, but Arizona, as a very red state, had the most female governors of any state in the country. So sex is just not a big driver. It's more values. It's how you view the role of the federal government and all these ideas. If you have an Annie Oakley out there, Arizona's going to vote for. They'd rather have that, a gun-toting woman than than a Gavin Newsom for sure.
We're going to talk about Gavin in a second.
Rich white guy. Yeah, you got a rich white privileged guy there.
But can you explain Krysten Sinema to me, since you're from Arizona? What the hell is going on with that? What is her motivation? What is she thinking?
So I'll give you a personal story here. I met Krysten Sinema in 2009. I was an intern at the Arizona State Legislature, and she was a state senator, I believe, and I think she was in charge or one of the Senate leaders in the Democratic Party in Arizona in 2009, which at the time Arizona Democrats were definitely in the minority. And back then, she was respected and smart but very far left. She actually identified as a pure socialist back then. And now she is this like right, I guess moderate in terms of the country, far right in terms of the Democratic Party. And I think what happened is she realized that to do well in politics, you need to reflect your constituency. Now you could say that that's lying and being dishonest, but she just learned how to play the game much better. And I think through that process, she probably moderated some of her views. I don't think she's lying about what she's doing. I think she honestly is toward the right end of the Democratic Party. I think she honestly is kind of in the middle. I think just maybe years of having to deal with Republicans in Arizona, she probably has befriended the political establishment in Arizona, which, like I said, is a lot of moderate Republicans and conservative Republicans. And I think things lurched to the left over the last 5 to 8 years, and she just found herself stuck in the middle. And I think she realizes that to maintain her position in Arizona, she's going to have to be more in the middle. I mean, Arizona is a really interesting state. It's the southern part is very young and brown and not as much money, and the north is much more white and Christian and a little higher income. And you have like these two different states between northern and southern Arizona. Mm-hmm. And she's trying to ride that line. And but yeah, it is interesting because she used to identify as very far left 10 years ago.
And they're trying to get an opponent for her in the primary. Like that's what I was reading this morning, is there's several candidates that they're trying to put up against her in the primary from the left.
It's going to be tough. And even among Democrats, they are struggling because a lot of your purist Democrats can't stand her. And your more practical Democrats are like, look, if we go far left, we're going to lose. And I think in this election, I don't think she's not up for election. I think Mark Kelly is. So she's got some time to chill. But they're having to walk a tightrope in Arizona. And I think that I'm biased. I'm shocker. I'm a registered Republican, but I think that she should continue doing what she's doing, and then maybe assess 2 years out from her or a year out from her election. But Democrats have to be careful because Arizona will flip on you. If you elect a Democrat who's too far to the left, you'll lose that seat to a Republican. And Republicans are learning too. The farther they get away from Trump, or the farther that millstone is separated from them, they're going to do better. And I think the last 4 years, I think Democrats did well because they could just show how crazy Trump was. Well, he's not going to be there, and they're not going to have that crazy Republican to point to anymore. They're actually going to have to stand on policy. And so I'd be very careful if I was a Democrat in Arizona about going too far left.
Yeah. And the midterms there's potential for the midterms just be a bloodbath. There's a full potential for them to lose across the board.
Yeah. I was just looking at numbers on that, and right now it's trending that way. If I were a betting man right now, I'd say Republicans take both the House. I think they'll take the House. The Senate will be very close. It might go like 50. So right now it's 50-50. I would say that it could be like 49-51. So I could see Republicans taking it. I don't think it's going to be quite the bloodbath that people are predicting for two reasons. I think that the pandemic craziness is going to subside as we get into the spring and the summer in America, for sure. And I think that Democrats are going to moderate a little bit. They already are starting to. You take somebody like Bill Maher, he's sort of the guy who's been saying, hey guys, like you need to not be crazy. And so there are people internally in the left that are realizing this. Now that said, Republicans are also realizing how to do well as well. They're like Glenn Youngkin did. He's able to walk the line between supporting Trump, but not too much, not acting like Trump, like supporting the policy without supporting the person. So he was able to do that pretty well. The only thing that kind of is the unknown is I think the economy. I think the economy is going to with inflation is going to get worse. Also, the summer tends to be rioting season, so you never know. We're only one police video away. We're one police video away from another riot, And so I don't know, those are the unknowns, but I would say that the big one being the pandemic is going to subside, and I think that Democrats are going to get a little bit smarter. So if it seems like a bloodbath now, maybe it will only be like a slight butt kicking, but I think Republicans will eke it out. I think they'll take back Congress, but I don't think it's going to be a huge majority.
Well, let's hit you brought him up, and let's hit one more thing on the Democratic side.
Yep.
Even after working for the party, I still mess up, and I'm like Democratic, and it's like I feel like a candidate where they yell at him. It's like, it's Democrat. It's like,
like when Republicans say the Democrat Party versus the Democratic Party.
Yeah, and it's like we know who you're talking about. We get it. It's.
I know. I always get annoyed. I'm like, guys, yeah, look, I don't like a lot of Democratic ideas either, but just say Democratic. Like, you just sound like a child. Like,
but that's the country. It's Democratic. No, it's a republic. No, we'll get into that.
I know. Oh God, I know. That one drives me nuts too. It's like, no, it is both. It's a democratic republic. Forget it. I know. I'm interrupting. Go ahead.
Newsom.
It can be both. It can
Newsom.
be okay,
Newsom.
All right.
The evil word, Newsom. Now, for those of us who live in California, we went through the recall, and it was a weird election because you and I talked about this. It's basically like we had Newsom or Larry Elder. And it was like, oh God, really? This is our options? Or we had a couple porn stars and a few actors. It was like the last one where Schwarzenegger won. But now that I look back at it, it's like I'm not a fan of Newsom. I don't think he should have gotten recalled. I have my whole thoughts on that. But I'm not a huge fan of our governor. And you and I talked about that last time you were on. But now there's these ideas being floated about his presidential aspirations. And he looks to me like he's cut from the same cloth. Biden, Clinton, a little bit of Harris. It's just like, I did the right thing. This is my life path. I deserve it. I look the part. I've got the haircut. I got the suits. Come on, just elect me. You wanna. And I just don't think you wanna should be a reason to be president of the United States.
Yeah, there was I think it was Thomas Sowell who said, as soon as you realize that politicians are not trying to solve your problems, they're trying to solve their problems, we're a lot better off. We will be a lot better off. And I think maybe so you dislike Newsom, and I guess I don't dislike him that much, mainly because my expectations are already so low. Maybe that's it. I just kind of expect the head of or the governor of California to just be a certain person. I mean, we're in a very blue state. That's just what I don't get angry. I don't get angry at Newsom. I think now, granted, I don't think he stands a snowball's chance in hell of winning the presidency. Anyway, it's long story short here. I don't hate Newsom. I see him as a natural reflection of the politics of California. And I think that it's a state where you need a lot of money to do well. It's an expensive state to live in. So you're going to see higher connected, people with privileged legacies are going to do well no matter which party you're in. And, I guess he's handsome. He speaks well. He kind of embodies most of the policies that your average Californian would want. So I don't know. But yeah, to answer your question about he feels like it's his turn. Yeah, I think you're right. I think if you're the governor of the biggest state in the country and the sixth biggest economy in the world, where is there to go from here except for the US presidency? And I think that's just what he's thinking. I mean, he sees Biden's probably not going to run, and he thinks he can do better than Kamala Harris. And a lot of Democrats think that as well. And they think so rightly. So I just look at it as a natural aspiration. So I expect him to run for president. I don't expect him to do well. And I don't begrudge him for running. I guess, like I said, my bar is I understand that you're motivated mostly by achieving a higher office. I don't know of a single person in politics who would not run for a higher office if they honestly thought they would win. I think that it's just in you personally. If you like to be out there and give your ideas and speak to people and you want to change the world, why would you settle for mayor if you could be governor. And why would you settle for governor if you could be president? I just don't know why people would just be satisfied with where they are.
I'll give you that. I mean, you can't take that away from somebody. That's the ambition, and that's what you need. The thing that, and this has happened not just in this state, but in other states that I've lived in, is when you have somebody who says, no, I'm the governor of, in this example, oh, no, I'm the governor of the state. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you all of my attention. Oh, by the way, I'm quitting because I'm going to run tomorrow, and it's like, well, wait a minute. You just lied to us. Now we don't have a governor because you're off running for election. And then we create all these problems. That's just one of my issues. And if it comes down to that, I'm going to be really irritated. I don't hate Newsom. I'm not angry at Newsom. I think he's just a politician, clear and simple. I mean, he's like version B6, it's like there's certain templates for politicians, and he's one of them. Okay, well, hold out your crystal ball, and we'll wrap it up with the Democrats. Who do you think, just who do you think has the best chance of being the choice of the party?
Oh, dear.
Right now? Oh, look at that one. I got you.
You did get me, because I did not research this. Dude, yeah, you got me. I would have to, I'd have to go back and see who actually, is in a decent position, whether it's Congress or the Senate or governorship. I don't know, man. I really couldn't give you an answer to that question right now. You got me with that one. Yeah,
you seem pretty optimistic.
I haven't done my research.
You do seem pretty optimistic, because, like you said, you see COVID starting to clear up a little bit. Hopefully the economy will start to right itself. The summer riots was an interesting.
I actually think the economy will not.
You don't think it will?
No, I think COVID will subside, but I think inflation will be a problem.
Do you think that's going to be the number one? That'll be at the top of the list of concerns. That's what the election will be about.
I think this summer, maybe not inflation specifically, but the economy generally, I think that will be the bigger issue this summer. And related to that will be also just general crime and frustration and things like that. But it's all related. Yeah, I just think when you have the highest inflation number since 1982, which was a terrible year, I think that would have to be a major problem. And so what we did is, when COVID hit, we basically expanded the money supply. We, printed digitally a bunch of money and gave it to large institutions to kind of put a little plug in the dam briefly. But once all that money starts to trickle throughout the economy and prices go up and they go up at different rates in different sectors, people are going to be frustrated, and they'll see their wages going up at 2%, and then they'll see their prices going up at 6%, and they're going to wonder what's going on, and they're going to blame the party in power. Yeah. So I think I am a little optimistic with COVID, but I'm less. It's very tempered by the economy. Yeah. So like I said, I think Republicans will take back Congress, but I think ideology will prevent it from being a total bloodbath. As far as Democrats running, I mean, I kind of go back to the original ones that ran the first time. Like I said, Buttigieg could run. I don't think he'll do very well. Kamala will run. I don't think she'll do very well. I think you'll see all those names that you mentioned are going to run. This is 2024. So now we're looking at a whole eternity away at that point. But, I think I tend to look more at the Republican side because I am a Republican. So I think they are going to win in 2024. But I need to pay more attention to the Democrats. Yeah, you're right. Newsom will run. I don't know, man. Democrats, I think, are kind of in trouble. They need to elect somebody who's kind of like Obama, but a little more moderate in terms of policy. I think somebody who can acknowledge middle America a little bit more and acknowledge more of the working class folks, and stay less away from those highly charged social issues, and I think temper down the racial rhetoric. I think kind of getting back to like the Bill Clinton, kind of like that. You could talk about expanding healthcare programs and things like that, but maybe not going full single payer. Somebody who just wants to. I think if Democrats channeled a Bill Clinton type, whether it's male or female or person of color, I think that they would do much better.
How do you use that? You made me think of something. Democrats are always accused of being apologists. It's this Trump used it a lot during his campaign and his time in the White House, because he said we should not have to apologize for being American. And I would argue that that's not what Democrats do. They're not apologizing for us being American, but there's this progressive wing that says, okay, we did some pretty nasty shit around the world over the last 200 years. Maybe we should take responsibility for that. And then that's looked at as weak foreign policy. That's looked at as being apologetic. That's being, letting our enemies have more power because we're not being as strong. Do you think that's something that is actually the way that it plays out? That it's an apology, being that you're self-proclaimed Republican, even though I know you're more of a libertarian. But talk to me.
I think well, even the libertarians irritate the shit out of me too. We can go into that. I kind of hate everybody. I'm more of like an angry moderate.
You're having a day.
Here's what I am. I'm more of an angry moderate who has a practical sense, who wants to affect the Republican side more, because ideally I'd like those principles more. But in terms of personalities and the day-to-day machinations of who but to whom, yeah, I see a lot of problems on the Republican side, and I see them on the Democratic side too. I just kind of, anyway, an angry moderate with a libertarian streak, maybe that's it, who registered Republican because he has to. What was the question? I'm dying.
Apologetics.
Apologetics. Yeah. So I think if I were to break down the emotional motivations, I think politics is very emotional. I think that people who lean left, and it's very simplistic, are more motivated by empathy, and people who lean right are more motivated by loyalty. And those are kind of the crux of the emotions there. So to the extent that Democrats are apologists, I think that is true. They're more likely to apologize than somebody on the Republican side. So we label them apologists. We like black and white when we're talking politics, even though it's not true. So I think yes, we should definitely apologize when we have done something wrong. I think we disagree though on what a wrong is. Maybe that's the problem, is we just don't agree on what we consider right and wrong. Sometimes
that's interesting.
Sometimes these disagreements are just much deeper. Like, we slap the word apologists out there. Maybe it's just that one side thinks that it's something worth apologizing for, and the other side doesn't. I mean, I don't know of a single Republican that thinks that slavery and segregation is a good thing. And almost everybody be like, yeah, that was fucked up. Yeah, we should apologize for that. But when you talk about, let's take something a little bit easier, or a little bit more difficult, I should say, is like the drop in the nuclear bomb on Japan in World War II. People would say, well, yeah, we should apologize for that. But people go, well, it helped to prevent, more people from dying during an invasion. So that's a harder one where you can go, okay, it's a little bit more difficult because maybe we don't think it's worth apologizing for because we didn't start the war, because we thought it would have saved lives because we didn't have to invade the mainland of Japan. So that's just like an example. Then you take an even harder one, that we maybe don't want to apologize for, would be like, the Iraq War. And it's very recent. The people who fought it are only in their 30s and 40s. They're still alive today. They have a very emotional attachment to the war itself. And so apologizing makes them feel really bad. And so we don't want to apologize because then we're hurting our veterans. And so I think the closer something is to you, the more gray it gets. And I think, to round back to your original question, I don't know that apologist or non-apologist is the best way to look at it. I think is it something worth apologizing for, or is it not? And who's responsible? Like, you don't want somebody who's innocent, who didn't do it, apologizing. I think that's the other part of it.
Well, I want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
And this isn't that, I just want, from the outset, I want you to know this isn't like a gotcha kind of thing. This is a genuine question.
I like gotcha questions though.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
CV.
Right. So you were a fighter pilot. You were a pilot in the military, and you flew missions, correct? Yeah. Okay. So without getting into what missions you flew or what you did, if you were a pilot who dropped bombs as part of your mission, you're aware of the fact that you are killing people. That's the job. You're at war. So if somebody comes up to you and says, you need to apologize because the mission that you were given was given to you incorrectly, it was given to you on false pretenses, it was given, whatever it is. It comes up 5 years later that it was all done for the wrong reasons, whatever it is. Do you, as the pilot, as the person that carried that mission out, do you then have responsibility to say, I apologize for doing something that I was ordered to do, even though I was following orders and those were instructed? Or do you then become a person, you're like, oh, well, you know what? I killed these people. I was involved in this happening. I wish I could have had more information. I mean, it gets so muddled because you're a person, but you're also following orders. You're also following, your commander-in-chief's instructions. There's a chain of command. You have to do what, unless they're literally like, we want you to go bomb that church. And you're like, well, hold on a second. That's a war crime. How does it affect you as a person then?
So I do think that it's fine to apologize when you were the person who did it and you're apologizing for yourself. And you honestly think that you did something wrong. I think that's, and even if you did something wrong, but you don't think you were completely at fault, like maybe it was a mistake. Like I apologize all the time if I bump into somebody, even though it was an honest mistake. We say, oh, I'm sorry. Like it's just a natural reaction. I think that's fine. I think where the apologies get gray as to whether you should apologize or not is when you're apologizing for other people's actions. And I think that's the problem with a president or a nation apologizing, is that you're now apologizing for people who may not want to apologize. So I think an apology needs to be a personal thing for it to be really effective. Or if you're going to apologize for a nation, it needs to be really cut and dry, something that a good 80 to 90% of the nation actually agrees that they should apologize for. But if it's like 55%, I don't know. I mean, because now you're really gonna hurt a lot of people who didn't agree with that apology. I don't know. It's a tough question, but yeah, to answer your question, if I'm the one who did it, then sure.
Yeah, it's just it's a complicated subject. I mean, like what you bring up. So we apologize to Japanese Americans for internment camps during World War II, because at this point we look at that and we realize we messed up. That it was done under false pretenses. There was no reason to do it. A lot of it was xenophobia. A lot of it was racism. And as a nation, we look back and we were like, nope, we effed up. That shouldn't happen. Yeah, but you might. And they were Americans. And they were Americans too. Yeah. Absolutely. We to our own people. And then you have other situations where it might be, oh, well, you know what? We went into this country in South America and we overturned the government, and, CIA went in, Well, there's going to be a lot of people who said, no, we went in and did a good thing. We went in and we overturned this government, or it was done for the sake of democracy, or it was done for this, or whatever the reason is. And then you can't apologize, because then, like you said, certain population is like, you don't speak for me. You don't speak for how I believe that played out, or history, or whatever. And then there's also this argument that I hear a lot. I'm sure you've heard it too, where it's like, well, that was ancient history. And I hear the one that bothers me is I hear that from slavery and from Indians, Native Americans. Well, that was 200 years ago. We don't have to apologize for anything. That doesn't change anything. That's ancient history. That was my great, 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 great grandfather. It doesn't affect me. And then you get into the discussion about, well, there's systemic racism, and there are things that are happening nowadays that are a direct result from that. So then do we need to take responsibility for that? And I think that's part of the cultural argument that we're having right now is, where is it? Look, something that happened 1,000 years ago, that's really ancient history. There's nothing we can do about that, but we can make changes, but we don't have to apologize for that. And there's no right answer, wrong answer. It's just, you made me think of it because I thought about you being in the plane, and suddenly decisions are being made. You have to follow orders. And then afterwards you look back and you're like, wow, now I have more information. Now I know something that I didn't know before. But that was kind of depressing. Yeah, no, I think to kind of to answer, I think when you should apologize, I think if it needs to be again, if it's personal, if it's coming from you, I think it's more effective, and it's more honest as well. I think it needs to also be, do you honestly think you did something wrong?
because I think you can apologize when when you shouldn't. I think sometimes an apology is not the right thing to do. We kind of naturally do it when we're being polite in daily society. We just say sorry when it's no big deal. But at the national level, when you have armies and cultures and battles between civilizations, I think the stakes become higher, and I think the apology carries more weight, both in positive and negative. So you just have to be more careful. So I think, if there's a genuine agreement that we have done something wrong, and then yes, I think an apology is warranted. So
I think you're right too. I think, like you said, you bump into somebody and you're like, "Oh, sorry, are you?"
Yeah.
And it's like there's certain words out there. Sorry, I love you. Like there's certain terms that we have a nice day. There's certain terms that have gotten to a point they have no meaning.
How are you?
And it's like you don't even realize, you're at the restaurant and the waiter says enjoy your meal, and you're like, you too, and you don't even realize what you said because it's just you're just responding. It's almost muscle memory, and we don't even realize what we're saying. It takes a value.
I think also it's on the permanent record too, and it becomes a part of history. It's set in stone. So when a national level politician, I'll just say the president. So when the president issues an apology, it's like a formal stamp in the ground that this is what happened. And I think that permanency makes it more difficult and makes that apology just so much more consequential than what we would do in our daily interactions. So like you're right that I think, hey, when we do something bad, apologize. It's not going to hurt anything. It's the right thing to do. I'd say mostly yes, that's correct. But there is that permanent stamp in the ground in history that I think makes people hesitant, and they go, what are the consequences going to be after that? So now from heretofore, the U.S. is now the bad guy because the president admitted so. Now anything happening in the future, anything that America does is automatically a bad thing because they admitted it, that they were bad. So it becomes so built up. I wish it weren't like that. I wish apologies were like you said, like it's just if you did something wrong and you could just apologize and it's no big deal. I don't know. You have to ask like a speechwriter or like a political communications expert that maybe a spokesman for the UN or a former spokesman for the president to see what they say about apologies, about formal apologies.
Yeah, we need an international version of, oh, my bad, bro. Like there needs to be
like a little maybe that's we could like, okay, here's the level of apology. We have the I'm sorry I was bad and you were right and I'll never do it again. Then we could have like the hey, my apologies, and then we have like dude, my bad, and we have like a what would be lower than that, like oops. I don't know. You could have like a level 5
diplomatic oops.
A diplomatic oops. Yeah, I know. I think like that was the Iraq War. I think President Bush came pretty close to doing that without actually saying, I'm sorry, I was wrong. He basically said, I wish if I could do it over again, maybe if I had had better intelligence, I would have done something different. Like that's as close as you can come to an apology without apologizing.
He's pretty good at that.
Yeah.
But so speaking of people who love to apologize, let's jump over to the other side of the electoral and let's talk about Trump. And I'm being facetious. Okay. I don't think the man has ever apologized in his entire life.
No.
Do you think he's going to run?
No.
Really?
No, I don't. I don't think he's going to run. He's going to fake it. He's going to head fake it, and he's going to threaten to run, and he's going to insult anybody who doesn't do what he wants them to do, and he'll make life hard on people. But I think he's going to say, "Hey, look, guys, I did it." He'll fake and say that the media establishment's going to prevent him from winning anyway. It's not worth it, and it's corrupt. And by the way, that politician over there who's not on board with me, like make sure you vote for his opponent. I think he's going to look at himself as more like a kingmaker and play that role than actually running. I just think behind the scenes, I think there's going to be a lot of Republicans who be like, hey, dude, you need to stay away. You're great at, rallying your type of base, and we need your base to help us win, but let us be the ones who actually run and are the face. Like you can be the sideshow and be the cheerleader or or the executioner if you want, but don't actually run. I mean, like I said, I'm not a Trump Republican, but I mean, I hope he doesn't run. I really don't. I just think that I liked some of his policies, but I think the liability is just too high. And I know a lot of moderate suburban type of Republicans like myself who are hoping to God he doesn't run either. And that might only be about 30 to 40% of the party currently. I don't know, maybe 50, but it's growing. I think there's a lot of people who are, I think the Trump emotion is going to subside because it wasn't really about Trump to begin with. I think this is the mistake people make. They think that Trump was sort of the cause of all this. He certainly was some of it, but he was also a result. He was a result of pre-festering anger as well. And I think that's going to start to go down. I think people are going to, on the Republican side, are going to want maybe the fighter that Trump was. They want somebody like that, but they want somebody who's a little more, has more of a intellect about them, has a more calm demeanor, knows when to throw punches and when to hold punches. And I think, right now there are people talking about DeSantis. I mean, he's sort of like a Trump minus, mm-hmm. He's a little less version of that. So I think somebody like him will do well if he can stay away from just the unnecessary insults and, using the Trump tactics. If he could go away from that and just kind of still fight back, because he does like to fight, I think he'll do well. Somebody like Tim Scott or Nikki Haley, they don't fight really much at all, but they are still Republicans and respected. You'll see those two run. So I think Trump will stay away. I think I think maybe he wants to just to avenge the loss, but I don't think he'll do it.
I think back to our last conversation when you said one of the things that you liked about Trump was the fact that he did fight for whatever it was that he believed in or whatever he wanted to fight for. It was just that there happened to be too much collateral damage of him taking out babies on the side. And you told it much better. I've told it to many people.
Yeah, the baby analogy seems to be, he was a counterpuncher, and once in a while he would hit the target. Other times he would hit the baby, you know. And it's like, dude, don't hit. You want somebody who knows what they're punching at. You don't just automatically start. Yeah, don't just out there throw haymakers and hit everything in sight. Like, dude, it's just like, you just kind of like, that's the feeling I get. I'm like, I like it, but I'm like, after about 5 seconds of throwing haymakers, I'm like, oh, dude, stop. Like, just go away. That's kind of
it's tiring. It's got to be, even for a Republican or wherever you want to describe yourself, it's got to be tiring. I mean, there has to be a point, even where the staunchest Republican is like, enough. Just give me a day when you don't punch a child.
Yeah, I kind of checked out. I went during the Trump years. I kind of just stopped watching a lot of news, to be honest. It just wasn't healthy. Mm-hmm. But once in a while I'd get sucked in. And I would get irritated at Trump. But I gotta say, I'd get irritated at the media too. And I would get irritated at people that were fighting against Trump unnecessarily, where Trump would say something obtuse and generalized. And I'm like, okay, like, yeah, that was a dumb way to say it, but he didn't mean it that way. And you're kind of misconstruing it intentionally now. So I kind of got disgusted by both sides during the Trump years, whether it was the far right or the most of the media and most of the far left. I was just like, I just kind of checked out. So that's where I was. So I think I became a little less irritated at Trump because I stopped listening to him. I wasn't out there following his tweets. So like I said, I just wasn't. Maybe that's why I wasn't as angry, because I just wasn't listening to him. And I have some friends, most of my friends who were on the left were always very angry. And I think just because they were listening to him more. So I guess people are going to pay attention to more what they hate. And I think that's a psychological problem that we need to get over. People are much more likely to respond to something that they hate. And I don't know why. We can get into evolutionary biology to talk about that, but you really got to check how much you're exposing yourself to online, and news. And it's just out there to make sure that you re-click and that you remain angry.
That's what the cable news on the left, I'll even say center left to the left. I mean, that's what they made their coin on. That's how they made their money, was what did Trump say today?
Yeah.
And then when he was out of office, suddenly, they have nothing to talk about, because they can't critique Biden because he's their man, and you can't go against the party.
Yeah. It's so insincere. And I hope you're right, that the middle starts growing and rising up, and people having just more honest conversations. Most people are like me and you. We don't agree on everything. I'm more to the right, you're probably a little bit more to the left or middle, and that's fine. But, at least be sincere. Don't lie about your opponent's arguments. Don't put words in your opponent's mouth. Do the best you can. Realize they're a human being as well. And, we got to live in a country together. And it's a big country. We have 330 million people in a very geographically diverse country with lots of different interests. And if you want to be a part of a country that size, you need to acknowledge the fact that you're going to have to make room for people. If you want a super pure ideological country or society, then it's going to be a very small country. And I don't want that.
I tell friends of mine from other countries, and they're like, well, describe the United States. I'm like, we're a lot more like the EU than you think. I mean, we are, I don't think we're 50 little countries, but we're definitely like 30 little countries. Some of our states, are more alike than others, but it's herding cats in this country just to get anything done sometimes. It's rough. So going back to DeSantis, like Trump and him aren't they're not friendly toward each other lately. I don't know if you heard the thing the other day where he called him out. He's basically like on the boosters.
No, tell me about this.
Oh, so Trump did an interview. I want to say it was Bill O'Reilly, but I'm not positive on that. But he did. It was like at AIPAC or it was one of the conservative groups. And he got up and he was in front of the crowd and he basically said, "Yeah, I got my vaccination, I got my booster," and the crowd booed him. Booed Trump. And he's like, whoa. Yes. And he stops him and he's like, "Look, it's healthy." He's like, "I'm the one who developed it." He gets into all that. But then it comes out where he goes after a lot of Republican politicians because they're asked, "Did you get your booster?" And they won't answer the question. They got them, but they don't want to come out and alienate some of their people. And I guess he's starting to go after Ron about some of this stuff. He's like, "You need to come out and be honest, because you're the one leading the charge in Florida that you don't need the vaccinations. You don't have the mask policy, all of this stuff that's going on."
So Trump is more on the left side then, if you're to be simple about it.
But he's also a populist. So he's trying to find But the other thing too, is I heard a number today and I wish I wrote it down, but it's something like 70 to 90%, it's up at the higher end of baby boomers have gotten vaccinated. And that's a lot of his base right there. So they believe in the vaccination. It's the mandates that everybody has the issues with.
Yes, definitely.
That's the majority of what's been going in. The Supreme Court came out and they gave Biden a split decision. They said healthcare needs it, but you can't tell companies to get it. Here in California, I'm waiting for Newsom to come out with an order that says you have to do it. So I don't know if it's saying Trump's going left. I think lightning's going to hit me if I say that Trump's going to the left, but I think you're looking at a situation where he's now kind of coming a little bit more to the center and he's being honest, but he's also using that as a weapon because he knows that these deep red state candidates can't come out and say what they really want to say, and he's calling them out for it. And if he gets to the debates, before he drops out, he is going to take people down with him. And I think DeSantis is one of those people, because even if DeSantis gets to the point where he's a viable candidate and he's on that stage and Trump does enough damage to take him down and then drops out for whatever reason, because he really doesn't want to be president again, I don't know if DeSantis will have enough time, money, staff to come back from that and be able to reorganize his campaign and change the message, because it's always about the message. And if he can't craft that message, he's not going to come back and be a viable candidate after that. Trump will have done the damage.
Now, why is DeSantis in trouble to begin with? You're saying it's because he's telling people not to get vaccinated, or he's telling people that
he won't come out and be honest about it. He won't come out and be like, oh, well, I got it and I got it. And Trump's coming out and he's like, all of you candidates should come out and be honest about yourself. Trump says people should be honest.
Wow. I have not followed this, but this is interesting turn of events here. Yeah, I didn't know DeSantis was not saying whether or not he was vaccinated. I didn't know that. I
believe he says he's vaccinated, but he's not booster. And he's like, so Trump's new thing is the booster. He's like, because that's the argument everybody has is like, well, how many shots do I got to get? And then it came out of Israel yesterday or the day before that the fourth booster isn't doing what they thought it would. So now people are like, oh, it's going to be 5. It's going to be annual. It's going to be this. It's going to be that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. I do know in the Republican circles, the issue is not vaccinate. The issue is mandate. Now, there are some who are against the vaccinations, and that's true. And that cuts across a lot of political and socioeconomic and racial lines. There's so many different ways that could parse out. But yeah, in general, yeah, you'd say Republicans are a little more hesitant on the vaccines than Democrats. Then again, Republicans also live in more rural areas where there wasn't a huge COVID problem, and Democrats tend to live in bigger, more urban areas where COVID was a big problem. So some of these issues are overlapping. But yeah, I mean, no, well, then I kind of agree with Trump on that why not just tell people what you did? I mean, there's many ways that you can craft a message. You can just say, hey, look, this was the right decision for me. And I'd say if you're somebody who's in a similar situation as I am, I think you should get the vaccination. I think it's a good idea. I felt fine. I talked to my friends. I'm like, look, I got the vaccination. I'm boosted. My wife is the same, and we feel fine. She's pregnant and she got it and she's fine. And we haven't gotten sick, but you do what's right for you. That's kind of how I do it. And I've never had anybody complain or call me an asshole. I've never had anybody on the left tell me that I'm anti-vax, because I'm not. And I'm anti-mandate, but I've never had and I've actually convinced a couple of friends on the right to get a vaccination. I just, they're like, oh, you got it. I'm like, well, yeah, I got it.
What was their argument? What was their argument?
They never really gave one because I didn't press. I think they just said that they wanted to wait because it was new. And I didn't go down the road of, well, it's mRNA has been around a long time. And this, I mean, because they kind of they do have somewhat of a point that it is, mRNA technology is not new, but these particular vaccines were sped through more quickly than the other ones have been in the past. So it is new-ish. And then other people would say, well, they had already gotten COVID and they wanted to wait for antibodies to subside. So there's all over the map. Nobody was like anti-vax. I don't have a single friend who's just anti-vaccines in general. Nobody's anti-vax. They're more like hesitant because of it's new, or they already had COVID. Those are the big ones. Nobody has said that they think that the medical establishment is out there to implant chips and make us track us or control the population. Yeah, like nobody has said that. Maybe just I wouldn't hang out with people who are like that to begin with. But I think it's more it's new and they want to wait and see, and they already had COVID, and the people who they know who had COVID, it's not been that bad, and so maybe that's why. It's even with the flu vaccine. Prior to all this, I got my flu vaccine maybe every other year. Usually it was just out of laziness that I didn't get it. But a lot of people never got their flu vaccines, even though everybody tells you to get a flu vaccine. So we weren't arguing about whether you're anti-vax back then. So, now with COVID, it's 10 times worse than the flu or more. So now I guess it's a little bit makes more sense to debate the issue. So
I had heard an interview. I had heard an interview with, it was on NBC with, I want to say it was Lester Holt. And he was interviewing the CEOs or the muckety mucks from Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, Pfizer. And this was right before the vaccine was being released. Like they completed it. They were in the final testings and they're like, we're getting ready to release it. And they were trying to explain to everybody it's going to be okay. And he posed that question, and he's like, why is it that this has been rushed through? If this has been rushed through, how do we know it's safe? And that's what everybody said. And they said, well, actually, it didn't go through as quickly as everybody thinks. And you're like, huh? And they explained that because of the way the government got involved, and they Operation Warp Speed, because of all of the limitations and a lot of other things that the government took off, because they weren't worried about the price structure, the entire process went incredibly quicker. Because these guys were saying usually they have to sit around with researchers, accountants, medical people, salespeople, all of these different departments, and they have to figure out how much are we going to charge for it? How much is it going to cost us? What's the competitor going to do? And all of these financial implications were taken out of the equation. And they explained that because they didn't have to deal with that, all they had to concentrate on was developing the vaccine and testing it. And they took this entire chunk of time out of it. And they're like, that's part of the reason we were able to safely get it quickly to the public. Some people say that's not true. Some people say it is true. But if that is the fact, that explains a lot of it, because we all know how much money is involved in the pharmaceutical industry. We know, there's no secret there. So if that's true, that explains a lot of the process. And that explains, okay, that makes sense. I could see that taking 6 months. I could see that taking a year just to figure out how much you're going to charge for this little pill or this shot. So it was an interesting interview. And I wonder how much that was true. But
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they were getting compensated by the taxpayer to some extent. I also heard that the FDA had taken away some of the regulations that would normally hinder things from going out. So you have a lot of obstacles that were taken away for this to get out. That said, I don't know if that was a good idea or not. I guess we'll see. I mean, the future is always uncertain. We don't know what the long-term effects are of these vaccines, but then again, we don't know what the long-term effects of COVID are. We just don't.
I heard that. I heard a guy getting interviewed yesterday. I want to say it was from somebody from the CDC. It was somebody in the medical arena, and they said exactly what you said. And they said, well, it's because there's people now doing the chickenpox thing. They're like, I'm going to go out and get myself infected, and that way I'll have the antibodies. Like when we were kids, our parents sent us, grab all the kids and send them over to the chickenpox house. Yeah. And they said, he's like, you can't do that because you don't know what the long-term effects are of COVID. And I'm like, but isn't that the exact argument that people are using about you don't know what the long-term effects of the vaccine are? So I'm like, basically, you can't use that argument if this is the exact same argument that your detractors are using. So I think my biggest thing about everything going on is that there's so much information. There's so much lack of information simultaneously. We don't know if this is true. We don't know if that's true. There's a lot of just trust us. We have your best interests. Although we find out then that that's not true, or from experience, we find out that people don't have our best interests. It's this wild west of just getting up in the morning with this free-floating anxiety of not knowing what's going to happen next, or not knowing if I'm making the right decision. And I wrote an article recently about COVID shaming, and people automatically assumed I was talking about people who are like, oh, well, you're not getting the vaccine, so I'm going to shame you. There's that whole thing. Should we not give healthcare to people if they don't get the vaccine? This coming from the left, which is the party that says there should be healthcare for all. Unless you don't get the vaccine, then you don't get healthcare. But there's COVID shaming, which is actually people who do everything they can to protect themselves, wear the mask, get the vaccine, wash their hands, do everything, and they still get COVID, which it's 1 in 3 in California, but it's 1 in 5 in the country. And then they blame themselves like they did something wrong. And it's called COVID shaming. And it's this people that are like suffering mentally because they're like, I did everything and I'm now a victim, and oh my God. And we're not helping. There's a case that I quoted in the article in China where they do public shaming. And one of the things is they arrested a bunch of human traffickers who were smuggling people, and they didn't get in trouble for smuggling humans. They got in trouble because they broke the COVID protocols. They shamed them for breaking the COVID protocols, not the fact that they have all of these people that they are smuggling and selling into slavery. I'm like, what is wrong with us when this is the way that we're trying to get people to do the right thing? So
it's unfortunate when you have a pandemic that arises in the age of social media, and it just exploded like wildfire, and it's making us act in ways that are not very decent. sometimes. And yeah, I think people need to not, kind of going back to your apology, the discussion we had about that, it's like, apologize when you honestly think you've done something wrong. And same thing with shame. If you honestly feel like you've done something wrong, okay, well then, yeah, then you should feel shame if you've done something wrong. But if you haven't, like, mistakes happen, I think, you can't protect yourself from everything. Do the best you can. And then learn to let it go. I think a lot of these things are psychological. I think we have as much of a psychological problem as we do a political problem.
Oh yeah.
It's so these things permeate in all over.
Do you remember when you were a kid and you did something wrong, or you hurt someone, or you did something legitimately wrong, and you felt that feeling that you had wronged somebody in the cockles of your heart and in your stomach, and it was like you were sick and you needed to apologize to that person because you had to get it out. It's like we've lost that. We've lost that true guilt. We've lost that true humanness of, oh my God, I've harmed someone. I need to make amends. And if we could get back to that, can you imagine how happy we'd be? Can you imagine how everything would just be a lot smoother if we took responsibility for real things?
Yeah, I think yes. And again, back to that apologizing thing, I think it's when you have done something, you can apologize. I think when it has to be a personal thing. I'm not a big fan of apologizing for other people or forcing people to apologize or shaming. I don't know. I'm not the type of person that wants to project anything negative in general. Mm-hmm. Like if somebody has done something bad, I'll usually, if I have 90% of stuff, I just let go because I just don't want to waste time. But if it's something important, I'll tell the patient, hey, this is what happened. This is what you did, just so you know, and see what happens. And then if I don't get the apology, I say, I'll apologize I won or whatever. I kind of shake my head and walk away. But that's very rare. But yeah, you're right. If it's something that you honestly have done and you feel that pit in your stomach, then an apology can set you free as much as the other person.
It just feels like we lost it. Yeah. You'll have to show one day when you have a kid, you're going to have to show them this podcast. You'll be like, we're going to talk about apologies today.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's hit one more thing and then I'm going to let you go.
Sure.
We'll wrap this up.
Sure.
So we talked about the Republicans. We talked about DeSantis. We talked about Trump. Who do you see? Who's out there that I'm not thinking of that you think they got the twinkle in the eye and they might actually be able to pull this thing off?
Oh, I mentioned Tim Scott and Nikki Haley. Oh boy, outside of that, Marco Rubio will run. We'll see a lot of the same people that ran last time, and then you might add a couple that didn't. But I think those are three big names that you'll see on the Republican side. And we'll have to see. I don't know. I mean, it's a ways away. It's a ways away. I mean, 2024. We have a year before, about a year before that starts really kicking into gear. Yeah. And then we'll see what happens with 2022 elections, because that'll dictate a lot of the feeling in the country going into 2024. And like I said, I think if the one thing people are not talking about right now, I think is the economy. I think COVID will be less of a factor. The economy will become more of a factor in the next two elections.
Yeah. We're going to revisit this in November. We're going to talk.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about this again. How's the show going? How's the Greg Krino Show going?
It's going well. I just published my 53rd episode, and the last two I did were actually ones without a guest. It was just me talking about the law. So I was talking about actually the OSHA mandates. So I did a whole episode on the constitutionality of the OSHA case and the Medicare case. And if people who haven't been following it too closely, basically the OSHA case was struck down. So OSHA lost that case. Then the Medicare vax mandate was upheld. Mm-hmm. So I did a whole episode on those and kind of broke down the constitutional themes and kind of where the right and the left come from. So I think if you listen to that, the most recent one, episode 53, if you listen to that, I go way back, a couple thousand years of philosophy kind of review. Yeah, I know it's a real, I don't blame you if you don't listen to it or if you fall asleep halfway through. It's not for everybody. But if you have an interest in that, I recommend you listen to it, because I kind of bridge the gap between right and left and kind of talk about where those ideas come from, and then dig into the constitutional principles and I look at what the justices actually use when they're analyzing the Constitution. So when you think, okay, why do the liberals vote one way and the conservatives vote the other way? You'll find out during that episode, and you'll be able to, when future cases come down, because they will, that lay down or that fall right or left, you'll know what themes each justice is relying upon, and you can tell which ones have good arguments and which ones have bad arguments, and maybe in future cases you can tell where you would stand. So maybe when you're having a drink with friends, you can kind of help people get along a little bit better. So instead of your friends on the right going, I think it should be this, and the ones that I think it should be that, you'd be like, well, actually, you can be one of those people that says, well, this is why there's that argument, and here's why the justices fell the way they did. But
yeah, and they may just look at you and say, shut up, we want to argue. That's what we do.
Yeah, I know. That's the problem. You got to be able to get your argument out in about 10 seconds. That's all you have on a Friday night at the bar sometimes.
It really has. Life's become a bunch of elevator pitches.
Yep.
Well, I know one of my guests, Stacey Roberts, he listens to the show. I have a feeling he's already looking up your show because that's totally up his alley. So I'll probably get emails about that. So he's a historian. That's his thing. So
cool. Well, he can have plenty of critiques for me then, because I'm sure I
you've heard him on. I don't know if you've heard him on the show. Stacey's he's a real level-headed guy. He's really knowledgeable about history. He talks about certain presidents a little bit too much, and I give him a hard time about that. It gets a little like, okay, can we get off Miller Fillmore, please? But he's always fun to chat with, and that's totally the kind of stuff that I know he's already looking up as he listens to this. And plus I name checked him on the show. So he's like, yay, you said my name. What did you, I got to ask you though, what did you think about just being the only person on the show? Was that new for you to just talk? I mean, you are a lawyer, but.
It's, I do like it, but it takes more prep than I expected. So I've done 4 episodes where it's just me talking, and it goes much better when I spend a whole day actually writing out what I want to say, because I'm learning that to become a good speaker, you have to become a good writer. And it really helps you think about what your arguments more logically. And you could tell sometimes, I think the episodes have gotten better, but some of the earlier ones where you can tell that I'm thinking a little bit too much and it's not coming out in a very clear manner. At least when I listen to my own shows, it's like that. But no, I like talking on my own once in a while. I want to get my opinion out there. And that's kind of why I like coming on your show, is that I can spout off, it's nice. And when I have guests, a lot of times I'm interviewing them, and 80% of the time they're talking, which is great because I want to learn. But once in a while, I want to get my stuff out there. So it helps me do that. But yeah, it requires a lot more research. I recommend a whole day of research and writing out what you're saying, and it'll help.
Sometimes it feels, at least for me, sometimes, because I come from a different background of performance and as well as journalism and hosting and stuff. So it's a little different for me. I do tend to ramble sometimes, and then I think everything I'm saying has a purpose, at least in the moment. And then the train kind of comes off the tracks, and suddenly I stop and be like, oh my God, I just talked for 15 minutes and I don't even remember what I said. I hope I didn't say anything. It's going to get me into trouble. So
yeah, or for me, it's just like I repeat myself.
Do you edit?
I do edit, but sometimes I'm just pressed for time. I hate to say it, but I'm doing only 1 show a week right now. I'd like to increase it, but sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I've got 1 day to throw out a podcast for Monday and I need to get to it. And then the next thing I know, it's 2 a.m. and I'm like, I've got to have this thing published in 3 hours. And I'm like, okay, let's just get this out. And I tend to rush. So I think preparation is the key when you're doing an episode by yourself.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, have your notes down there. And one thing that I do, and anybody who hosts podcasts, I highly suggest this if you're trying to get your groove, is I love scheduling like 3 or 4 guests in one day. And it's like nice. A boot camp. It's like literally like it's like going to the gym, or it's like going to sports, practice or something. You are forced to do something for 6 hours. And at the end, you're exhausted. but you're primed because you're just like, you just got to practice and practice and practice. And then you go back and you're like, this worked. And then that muscle memory kicks in and you're like starting to learn things, and I do postmortems on my episodes too. And I listen to the way I talk or the way I ask questions. And I'm constantly trying to tinker with it. And I'm like, okay, well, you said too many times, or you interrupted the guest too much, or you didn't interrupt the guest too much. There's some of that too. You have to keep things online. So anybody who's interested in doing a podcast, like there's so many things that you can learn just from repetition. It's like anything else.
Yeah.
The more episodes you do, the better you're going to get. So
yeah, and you got to listen to
yourself.
And you got to listen to yourself and be critical and find all your verbal tics. It can be harsh. It can be very harsh, but to get better, you gotta do it. You gotta do it. So I'm glad to see you're doing it. And you got a great smooth delivery and a great show and a great you're a great conversationalist. So I'm happy to see things are improving and moving in the right direction for you.
Thanks, dude. What a great way to end the show on a compliment. I will take that.
I want to get invited back on too.
There you go. Well, go everybody check out Greg Krino Show. The link is in the notes. He's on social media. I see him pop around from time to time. I got to talk to you about that. You got to be better about that.
I know. My social media is just awful. I need to outsource some of this, man. I want to be the one that just talks. And anyway, I'll talk more offline about that.
All right, man. I will appreciate you coming on and talking politics.
Yeah.
And that's the show, everybody. I'll talk to you guys next time.
Comes from the History's Train Wrecks podcast that focuses on stories like a temper tantrum that changed history, the president who promised not to run again and regretted it for the rest of his life, the World War II general who lost his pants on a secret mission in enemy territory. The History's Train Wrecks podcast, available now.
Hey everybody, hope you enjoyed the show. Help us spread the word by subscribing and leaving a review. If you want to support us even more, you can find a link to our Patreon account in the show notes. And if you're one of our diehard fans, head on over to the VikingDogStore.com, where you can find official Open Highway merchandise to show your support to the entire world. But most of all, thanks for listening.
For the highways of America, which for so many years were an assortment of as many designs and pavements as there were states, are now becoming one big road that can take you anywhere faster, safer, and more directly than ever before. What is this big road? Where is it going? How much has been built? How much is yet to come? These are questions we ask. Certainly traveling the entire system would be a memorable experience, but few of us have the time for such a trip.
Copyright, Viking Dog 2022. All rights reserved. The Open Highway is a trademark of Viking Dog LLC.